I'm really grateful to be here. What I want to talk about today is not a political speech, not how digital and technology necessarily drove Obama for America, but why we do it, why we do anything that we do. I talk about motivation, and we think about this theme of a better tomorrow. Sort of starts with this loaded word of better. What does better mean? Better means something different to all of us, and we all have a different sense of purpose about why we're here, why we choose the problems that we want to solve, and what a vision for a better tomorrow might look like. So when I think about motivation, and I was thinking and talking with Ezra, some of you I think were classmates, about talking here and what I wanted to share about my own experience. I found a speech that a lot of people have probably seen of Dan Pink, who talks about motivation, especially in the context of careers and teams, in along three axes: the need for autonomy, the need for mastery, the opportunity for mastery, and meaning. And the first two, we think about the opportunity to excel, and Jeff talked about this before, which was really, really thoughtful, and I really enjoyed his speech. Autonomy is the opportunity to excel and be given responsibility to do that. I want to focus on meaning. When we think about why anyone would decide to work on a presidential campaign, and believe it or not, I got into politics because I believed it was a way to make the world better. Anybody can question my sanity about that, especially given the current state of politics. Let's set that aside for the time being and realize that this is what I was driven to do. But it took me a long time to understand what purpose meant for me. When I need to go back in time a little bit and just tell you my story. And then I think sort of my vision for where I think we can go together, I'll hopefully come back together and all make sense, so stay with me. I grew up a lot like a lot of you and was a wild, mildly pathological overachiever. I was uncertain of what my own sort of vision of success needed to be or was going to look like, and so I ran through my high school and college years like Indiana Jones being chased by the boulder of sort of self-doubt and uncertainty, and I achieved, and I got a sense of purpose from achieving. Not from what I was achieving or anything in particular, but the act of excelling was the only thing that I knew how to do. It was sort of the only way I knew how to mitigate my self-doubt. And so what happens is I turned into sort of an unguided missile, which clearly is not conceptually a good idea and is dangerous, right? I sort of launched out into the world with no clear sense of what I wanted to do other than to achieve, achievement was the purpose of what I was doing, and I bounced from opportunity to opportunity, and I had no framework for understanding what it was that I wanted. And I got into my mid-20s, and I sort of got to this point where I was fairly successful and deeply tired. And tired in sort of an existential sense, not tired in a let's take a nap because we did an all-nighter, tired in the no matter how much I sleep, I'm just not feeling fed by what I'm doing. And I grew up in Washington, D.C. I grew up around politics, so I come by this disease naturally. I recognized something in myself around 2004 and 2005 after President Bush won his second term. And what I realized is that I believed that I was developing the mastery, and I had jobs with the autonomy that Daniel Pink talks about, but I wasn't working toward things that mattered. My life was getting better, but the world around me wasn't improving, right? And I had no capacity, I felt like I had no capacity as part of my professional life to change the nature of the world. And I felt self-centered, I felt a little lost, like I said before, and somewhere around that time was when David Foster Wallace gave his now very famous commencement speech at Kenyon College called "This is Water." And "This is Water" comes from a little parable that he used at the beginning of the speech, which is fundamentally about the necessity for humility and awareness in living a compassionate life. And the parable is there's two young fish swimming along, beautiful day. An older fish swims by and says, "Hey boys, how's the water?" And they kind of look at each other and they keep swimming along, and one looks at the other and says, "What the hell is water?" And it's very, very easy, this whole perspective of it's very easy to be automatic about what we do. It's very easy to get caught up in achieving because achieving is satisfying. It's easy to, for me, having a life driven by purpose wasn't automatic. It was something I had to go looking for, and it was something I had to cultivate and take the time to listen to myself and to listen to people around me and talk in an unguarded way about the things that mattered to me, which scared the crap out of me. But what I realized it was that the work that I was doing wasn't leading to a better world. Not in a way that better is something that we all define for ourselves. Not in a way that I felt like I was leaving an impact that I cared about. And so I shifted completely. I was working in startups. I was, like Jeff said, I was a self-trained web designer and web developer. And I went to work in politics, and I stopped working on technology. And as I began my sort of working in politics, what I found was a place where I felt like the work that I was doing mattered. I felt like there was a greater context, there was a sense of purpose, and we can have lots of totally great arguments over coffee and drinks later about whether politics or campaigns is purposeful. But I felt like what I was doing was leading to the possibility of change. And I've been wanting this to be something that was part of what I was supposed to talk about, the mysterious red dot. Sorry, I've been watching all the other conversations and I can't decide what I should do with it. That there was this sense of meaning and being part of something greater than the betterment and the extension and the growth of my own life. And as I think about my career and where I'm going and where you guys are all going, what are the problems that we're going to solve? There we go. This phrase kept coming up in my head as I was talking to Ezra, which is if we're going to have a better world, we need to solve better problems. And we need to get out of the habit of re-solving problems just because they're profitable. Now, I've worked in venture capital, I run my own company, I have done startups, making money is a good thing. There is a need for all of us, whether we end up working in truly purpose-driven, nonprofit type technology or in companies, startups, our own companies, that we care deeply about what we're doing because that's how we are most effective. It is what I have come to learn about myself that you're running away from that boulder, right? And this sort of like chase of self-doubt, that what purpose gives me is something to run towards, right? It gives me an arc to my life that has meaning and that allows me to have a filter for the things that I want to work on. And the challenge for everybody, and the challenge for me, and I've watched so many of my friends go through this, is we often get presented with this choice. And I think it's a very frustrating, very false choice, but which is this. It is you can go out into the world and you can make a living, or you can have meaning, right? You can go for wealth creation, or you can go for doing things that matter to you, but it's very, very difficult to do both. And I think there are speakers and very thoughtful people in the nonprofit world starting to tackle this culture. Dan Pallotta is somebody that some of you may have heard of, who's been talking a lot lately about the nature of what I call the purpose tax that we put on talented people like the people in this room. We look at the graph of the number of engineering jobs that are available in the world. The cost to your career and to your financial reward of working on problems of social, civic, and humanitarian problems can be incredibly frustrating. I had this phrase, I've watched as sort of a reference to Allen Ginsberg howl in my head since we started talking about this conversation of, I've watched the greatest minds of my generation destroyed by madness, destroyed by click tracking and photo sharing, that we keep solving these same problems because we feel like we have to. And figuring out what it is about in our own hearts and in our own souls that drives us to do things that matter is where we are going to do our best work. It is, without exception in my life, the times when I have done work that I am most proud and that I feel like has the most quality and depth are intellectually, everything that Jeff said about sort of intellectual challenges are essential, but intellectual challenges that lead to something better, lead to a better world, are the things that I find myself craving. I find myself craving the hardest, most complicated, most impossible. If anybody says it can't be done, it's the thing that I want to fly to like a moth toward a flame. And that's the fire I want to run into. But I want it to be about things like making the world better. And the challenge, I think, is tackling this sort of cultural bias around this purpose tax, right? And getting to a point where we, as technologists and engineers, aren't willing to accept it. And where our value and talent is not regarded as an administrative cost. I think this is part of why there's this massive technology deficit in the nonprofit world. It's why all the energy and time I've spent working with organizations like the UN can be incredibly frustrating because they are ambitious and understand the nature of their problems incredibly well, and they have almost no capacity to innovate. They could take this room full of people and have no idea what to do with you. So I think that's an interesting challenge because I think you guys know exactly what to do with you. And I think the operating posture here is that if we find something that we want to run towards, what would it be like if everyone in this room was working on purpose-driven tech? Right? What if we could sort of get earplugs and resist sort of the siren song of the startup and playing the startup lottery and listen to the things that mattered most to us and had the same kinds of opportunities? What could we solve? Right? We have enough passion and talent and innovation in the world to be solving more of our greatest challenges, more of the biggest, most intractable, impossible problems. Presidents for a long time, all the way back to Lyndon Johnson, have been making this statement that we are in an age of history where we can end things like poverty. I actually think we're there if we can make better choices about how we use these things. And those choices are about your choices and finding and taking the time to look inside and be humble and realize that achievement is finding a balance between humility and ambition that gives you something to run towards. And so what if in this world where we're all working on purpose-driven tech, what if Silicon Valley had to look to the nonprofit world for the next big thing? Now, I don't think that we're going to get to a point where more innovation happens in a nonprofit context. I'm not that bananas. What I do think is that we are imbalanced. What I do think is that I've watched too many of my own friends, and I've watched my own story of frustration of not working on the things that matter to me or doing the things that matter most to me as a hobby and not being able to do them as a career, right? And there is an opportunity to rethink where we're going. So let's get to work. Thanks.